Hello and welcome to Spoiled here at SIFTD Games and SIFTD.net. This is where we talk about spoilers, about your favorite kind of content. That could be video games, movies, or TV shows. And today we are going to talk about Star Wars: The Clone Wars Season 7. And I am joined by Matt from Game Face. Matt, how are you doing?
All right. Still locked down, but a lot of time to watch Clone Wars. I actually rewatched the whole series while we've been doing this.
Yeah, that must have been really fun, especially because Disney Plus came out, and that kind of was a good thing to promote it with.
There's a lot of filler in that series. I think there's a reason all those watch guides exist for it.
Very true.
There's a few arcs in there where I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna jump ahead. I'm not gonna make it to the Battle of Mon Cala. Like it's sometimes it just bogs down and sort of filler, and I have to move along. I think Rebels is a better paced and structured show, but I think Clone Wars has higher highs.
Yeah, for sure. And this is perfect. Well, we'll get to that kind of stuff. And I'm going to take care of a housekeeping thing really quick. We are SIFTD Games at SIFTD.net. And if you like this content, just head over to patreon.com/SIFTD and send us a few bucks so we can continue to making this great content for you guys. Also, if you can't do that, or in addition, you could go to Twitch and link your Prime account to your Twitch account and give us a free $2.50. So if you could do that, that would be amazing. But we're just going to get right into it. Matt, you kind of already mentioned it. And I was just going to, because Shane and I both, when we talked about the rise of the last Skywalker, we kind of talked about
Skywalker.
Yes, thank you. That we mentioned what Star Wars was like for us, our first times and as a kid, and what was our first movie, and what we know about the series. So I kind of give it to you to just let us know kind of what your history with Star Wars is like.
My first Star Wars movie was the original. My dad took me to see it in 1980 when they reissued it before Empire came out. Maybe it was 79. I was 3 or 4. And so he knew the new one was coming out, so he took me to see the old one when they reissued it, because back in the day, there was no home video. There was no DVDs or really even VHS or rentals, anything, or VCRs were very new, about a year or two old at that point for widespread home use. So if you wanted to see a movie, you saw it in a theater, or maybe you're lucky and it aired on TV later. But there was a period of time when I was a kid and before, when if you had a favorite film, there was a chance you might see that movie 3 times in your life, because it would never run in theaters again. And there was the only people. My dad was a collector at the time, and he and his friends collected individual film reels of the movie. So you'd hunt down the actual reels they played in theaters of these movies, and you'd project them with a home projector, and that's how people would watch movies that they loved without waiting for a reissue or another release in theaters. But he took me to see the original reissue, and then we saw Empire a few months later when that came out, and I loved it to death, in part because of the AT-ATs. I love the AT-ATs. They're dinosaur robots, which was like the coolest thing I'd ever encountered in my entire tiny life at that point. And I waited 3 years for Return of the Jedi. He subscribed to Daily Variety, which is still today the industry newspaper for film and TV. And anything that came through on the new Star Wars, he would hand over to me to keep. And so I got a bunch of things. And I remember he gave me this huge fold-out thing that the issue came in. So it was the size of a newspaper. And on the front it said, 20th Century Fox and Associates are proud to be distributing the number 1 and number 2 box office grossing films of all time. And you opened it up to be like a double gatefold thing, and it had a poster of Star Wars and a poster of Empire, and said Empire Strikes Back, and had the box office total at the bottom of each of them. And then you open those 2 up again to a 4 gatefold thing, and it was just a 4 newspaper page wide logo in red that said Revenge of the Jedi, the original title, and it said coming May 23rd or whatever, 1983. And I stared at that and opened it over and over and over and over, because I was 6, and by the time that movie, Return of the Jedi, came out, I'd literally waited half my lifetime, and I hated it. I didn't like Return of the Jedi at all when I was a kid. I thought it was dumb, and I thought they wrote Han badly because he's my favorite character, and I thought he just seemed like a goofball through the whole thing. I didn't understand who the Emperor was because I was too young to know what that whole political structure meant. I didn't understand why nobody wanted to kill Darth Vader anymore. I didn't understand the concept of redemption because I was, 8, and I was just sort of like, and I didn't believe Leia was his sister. Like I thought that made no sense at all. And so my dad used to tell the story that yeah, I took him to see the new Star Wars and he just bitched in the back seat the whole way home. It's just it was nothing. And I was done with Star Wars after that. I basically I didn't want I really want any of the toys. I didn't want to play with my stuff all that much anymore. It just sort of disappointed me. And I moved on to Transformers the following year and never looked back. And it wasn't until college that they brought them out on THX, the THX remasters. And my mom got me the letterboxed one, special ordered from Blockbuster, because you couldn't order. Everything was pan and scan back in the 90s. You couldn't see movies the way they were supposed to be shown because everybody wanted to fill their screen. And so you had to special order the letterbox widescreen stuff. And I got them, and I went back to my college dorm after the weekend, and I put on the first movie because I'll just put it on while I clean, clean tonight because I haven't cleaned in a while. And I ended up just sitting there watching the whole thing on it, sitting right in front of the TV, this is really good. I hadn't seen it in 10 years. I was like, I can't believe how good this is. I thought it was just gonna be like watching one of those stupid things you liked as a kid, and I was like, no, there's actual meat on this thing's bones, and I understand a lot of the meeting scenes better, and I understand a lot of it, and so that kind of brought my fandom back, and I was a fan through. I still played the video games and stuff, but I wasn't paying attention and watching the movies a lot. But I came back into it after that and never really left. And it is weird to think now, probably especially for someone your age or younger, that there was a 10, 12-year period where there was no Star Wars.
Yeah, so for me, my first ultimate Star Wars experience was definitely the prequels, and Jay and I talked about it a little bit because it's such a difference. And I knew of Star Wars when I was a kid. We had the original VHS of the original trilogy, and I always loved Darth Vader, but I never understood any of it because I was way too young at that time. And it wasn't until the prequels where I finally started to understand Star Wars, and I started to appreciate all the films, but I definitely still kind of like the prequels. I don't
hate the prequels.
Unfair opinion, but
I was unusual, I guess, of my generation in that I didn't hate them. I thought they were bad. I thought they were I don't think at least 1 and 2 are not particularly good movies, but I see what they're after. The concept is solid. You could take the bones of the prequels and you could make a real good trilogy out of that. The concept of the prequels and the concept of the story and the baseline of what it is completely valid. It absolutely works. A tragedy centered on Anakin Skywalker falling and being seduced by the dark side with the background of a political turmoil and a manufactured war and the downfall of a democratic republic and the rise of an authoritarian regime. That's a great setting. That's a great setup.
Yeah, and I think even
wasn't executed very well.
Yeah, and I think kind of bringing it all into Clone Wars is actually, I think they do. It's so nice to see that this supplemental content helps reinforce the great bones that those stories do have. Because I agree with you, the bones.
Yeah, Clone Wars makes Anakin a vastly more identifiable and understandable character, and it makes the Clone Wars series makes Episode 3 a much better movie.
Absolutely, I would agree 100%.
Because you can kind of twist, and these last 4 episodes as well, really, because they take place parallel to Episode 3, it's partly bull because this is being made 15 years later, so it's it's all retconning the errors of Episode 3 into being something more profound by
But I think the impact
convenient
of
we
that
never
is
found
really
out about
important.
Ahsoka before now, but
yeah,
but it all works. And also it's Dave Filoni gets Star Wars probably better than anyone else.
Yeah, right now at Lucasfilm, he's amazing at it. Yeah, let's just
I love The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars film. Suck it, haters.
Same here.
But and Rian Johnson is he did amazing. But Rian Johnson made a great film on top of making a great Star Wars story, and I think extrapolated very well from the original trilogy. But I think Dave Filoni gets Star Wars on Dave Filoni always feels Dave Filoni's stuff, including The Mandalorian, always feels like he's just playing with his toys. And there's an element of Rian Johnson in Last Jedi kind of took the ideas and themes in the original trilogy and extrapolated them into something way more interesting and way more thoughtful than what JJ had given us in Force Awakens. And like, it was a really great way of saying like, oh, you want a dark, more adult-centered Star Wars movie? Here you go, The Last Jedi, boom. But Filoni's stuff is like, we're all fans. I'm just like you. I can make whatever I want now, and I'm going to start messing around. I'm going to tell a great story, but I'm going to give you these winks that it's like in Mandalorian where that troop transport shows up.
Yep.
And like, you don't, it's like, okay, if you never had that stupid toy, you just see it's okay, it's another vehicle in Star Wars. But if you did have that toy, you're like, Dave knows, Dave gets, like, it was like, he does, he puts stuff like that all through. And like, there's little touches in these episodes where you're like, man, that is a deep fucking cut. Like, there's one shot in one of the final 4 episodes that I was like, wow, dude, if I ever run into Dave Filoni again, I've met him a few times. If I ever run into Dave Filoni again, I'm going to hug him for the couple of the shots in these things, because he's rebuilding the parts of the old expanded universe that he liked, except he's doing it better and kind of under the radar. Like, it's a really cool thing to see. And I hope they keep doing more stuff with him. And I hope after the last 4 episodes of this, I will watch a CG Star Wars film from Filoni and company like a couple times a year, like DC Universe style. Like, if they're willing to do that and put it on Disney Plus, like, I think this should be a regular thing.
Absolutely.
They just proved that they have the chops for it. So
yeah, I would say, I think we both agree the quality on this is, I mean, there's the first chunk of episodes, which actually we should just get to really quick, and then we can get to the really, really, really good stuff, which I think
which is a good description of the season in general. Like, just get through those first few and get to the part you want to see.
I think the first few really show what Clone Wars started to turn into in regards to, if you were watching the first couple seasons of Clone Wars, it was very much a kiddie, by the book, 1 episode thread. But I think it was after season 3, if I'm correct, is when they started to expand it into multi-episode threads, and the stories in those became a lot more fleshed out. The characters felt a lot better. The context and everything, and made more sense. And I think that really matches it in this first part of that season.
It's much more like
good
that
stuff.
And I think it is interesting because I watched the whole series again during quarantine, and then my friend who had never seen it tried to watch it again, and she couldn't get into it because she just felt it was too young and and she's right. Like, the first couple seasons have a lot of like, characters make stupid decisions because the plot has to happen. You know, it's just not really very strong storytelling. And she jumped ahead to Rebels, and she loved Rebels. Like, she thought Rebels was some of the best Star Wars she'd ever seen. She loved all the characters. Like, she just wanted more Star Wars, CG Star Wars from Dave Filoni after that. And so she's gone back and is watching the whole Clone Wars thing again. She's trying again with like a guide I'd found for her of like, here are the arcs that are like necessary to the story building up to this final season, and here are the arcs that are just really good.
Which is that the same guide you posted to someone on SIFTD?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
It's like just like a white thing with like, it's like, here's the essential ones and here's the best ones highlighted in blue.
Yeah, for listeners, I think it's on SIFTD.net. I think it's on episode 208.
Yeah,
207 or 208. One of the two.
When you put this up, remind me, and I'll put it there too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure.
So they are going through it she and her mom are going through it with that. And they're up to mid to late season 3 now. And she's finally liking it better. Because part of her problem is she didn't like Ahsoka very much, because Ahsoka early on is such a standard sort of kid sidekick. You know, the kids need someone their own age to sort of get into the story. Like, she's Spike with Bumblebee. She's the Spike to Anakin's Bumblebee, or she's the Bumblebee to Anakin's to Obi-Wan's Optimus Prime. You know, she's the annoying kid character that like every executive in the 80s thought a kid needed to identify with anything in a cartoon series, right?
Yeah, it's the one that says, "Go away, kid. Like, stop bugging me with this." It's like, this is not important. Stop it.
And she gets way better moving on. So I think season 3 is where there's some good stuff in season 1 and 2. And there's a couple things like the rookies, the episode Rookies, where it's like the early on the clones that are in like they get attacked, and the commando droids come in, and their commander is the only one in the facility that has any experience, but they like trap him and like execute him on the stairs as he screams to them to remember their training. And I'm like, who is this show for? Like, it's
that was an intense episode, and I think it was a really well made episode.
Yeah.
And I think overall they did with the series really well is humanizing the clones, and you kind of see
making
that
the clones into someone you care about is one of the greatest feats of this series, I think.
Yeah, and you see it in the Bad Batch. Like that's just that's the first kind of chunk that we've ran into is that Bad Batch of where Fives is alive, and they surprisingly, and I guess now that I'm watching Rebels, I kind of can see it now with technology merging with humans and turning into more cybernetic improvements on people, because Fives has like cybernetic arm. He has a hand that he can now like stick into the machines like an R2D2 can, any kind of droid. And they've been downloading his specs on like what would they do in this scenario to be able to do the battles and be efficient on the bad side. So
and there's even an element of ties in with Vader and Grievous and such, the thing where like the more mechanical he gets, the less the other clones trust him. Which is also going to be a theme in Cyberpunk 2077. So like the idea that the more of your body you replace, the less human you are, which I think doesn't make a whole lot of sense in real world situations, because it's like, if someone comes back from the Gulf War and has artificial legs, they're not less of a human than anyone. But like in the world of Star Wars, it seems like you can only really do replacing things with mechanical parts seems kind of Sith alchemy-ish. And like, certainly that's how, Vader's mechanical parts are not plain old prosthetics. There's some kind of weird Sith magic going on there. Like there's some weird stuff happening. And like exploring that idea, which is another theme that's in Empire and Jedi, where, where Luke, Luke's mechanical hand becomes a very important thematic symbol in Return of the Jedi, where he realizes who what he looks down at his hand and realizes he's becoming his father, and which is something that a surprising number of people didn't get. Right? That's a thing I learned.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first thing I saw is he saw his dad's arm off, and he's like, "Oh my God, that's me! I'm turning into him."
Yeah, and like, so it's good. Here's the interesting thing here. I guess like my unorthodox opinion here is I now that I've seen the final episodes, I get why they felt the need to bring Fives in and like kind of deal with like a follow up to that story where he, in the previous one where they found out that he had the chip in his head that was like they didn't know what it was for, but all the clones had them, and like they it was kind of a big conspiracy thing.
And I think the cleverness about that episode, just really quick, is that like we all know it's Order 66. And so it's just that tension of like, we all know what it is, but them trying to like figure possibly discovering the thing or trying to stop the discovery is so fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the strengths of Clone Wars has always been that how it ends, that and that's sort of for all you spoiler phobes, that's one of the key elements of tragedy is that it's coming. It's going to end badly. You go sit down and watch Macbeth, that everyone's going to die at the end of that play. But you're sitting there at the beginning of Clone Wars and being like, how are all these clones that are such good allies of these Jedi going to just turn on them just because some old dude told them to?
Especially when they humanize them.
Right. And then Ahsoka, what happened to Ahsoka? Early on, everyone was like, Ahsoka's dead meat on a hook. There's clearly she's not going to live through this because we don't see her in episode 3. Now, Filoni, I think that was going to be the plan, to kill her off somehow and make that be one of Anakin's like separation anxiety problems. But I believe Filoni got so much support and pressure from mothers and little girls who loved Ahsoka. They basically begged him, don't kill this character because she means so much to so many people. And I think he found a much better solution for her.
But I would say, Ahsoka, let's talk about her for a bit, because she in the last couple seasons, it's weird because the show transferred to Netflix last season for its 6th season, and so it didn't really have a lot of plot storylines that came through. So it's kind of like Ahsoka stuff took place in season
6
5.
was pretty much like season 6 was pretty much just like, we're gonna wrap up a couple of loose threads, and we're gonna like there were some unfinished shows that Filoni wanted to do, and it's funny that like this series took 12 years to make. It started in 2008, and sometimes you see the show slips and doesn't remember that the Clone Wars in universe take place over 2 years, like a little under 2 years. And there's an episode, I think it's season 6, where somebody says to someone like, all these years of war, and it's like, well, no, it's been like 18 months, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it feels like, yeah, it feels like we've been through all these years of quarantine, but like, it's just funny that it's like sometimes I think the production staff forgets that like the show has taken 12 years, the war took 2, in the universe, but like Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order in season 5, in a series, and one of the best story arcs. All whose episodes are named after Alfred Hitchcock films because she's on the run and framed by things, which is pretty great. And it's an example of the show kind of like the show does a really good job over the course of 5, 6, and 7, sort of showing how and why Palpatine's machinations will work. Like kind of why he's so good at sort of like convincing people of a lie. It's a very plausible depiction. I think it's a more plausible depiction now in the world we live in because we've seen that people will believe lies no matter how outlandish. Palpatine feels a much more realistic villain to me now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on top of it, for her, she is almost in regards similar to Anakin, but it's just the path not taken.
Yeah,
She
and you
doesn't.
see, like she followed his teachings. You know, she and she has the same sort of feeling of like, you know, rules are only there as a guideline. Like if you think this thing, you know, you can do it better or you can do it more efficiently, you can save more lives or do the right thing, she'll do that instead. You saw that in the Onderon arc where she was training Saw Gerrera, who showed up in Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
That's also a nice arc because you finally get to see a little bit of him younger. He's also in Rebels. But like Saw Gerrera, if anyone saw Forrest Whitaker in Rogue One, I was like, that's weird that he was in this and we didn't really learn anything about his character. Go watch that character in Clone Wars and Rebels because that's where the meat of that character is. He's almost a cameo for fans in Rogue One. But and there's a lot of cool little cameos like that in these too. I will say this: I know that looking online, people hated the Ahsoka arc with the sisters like the most, but I liked it. I didn't. I know it's not as good as the final 4, obviously, but while I think episode 3, where they're in the jail cell, could have been one scene as opposed to a whole stretched out escape scene that ends up with them back in jail again.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, you could have gotten the character information across and not wasted my time with 20 minutes of an escape that doesn't work. But I liked her kind of having the upper lower decks thing where she has to kind of come down from that ivory tower and see how people really live. I like that they're on level 1313. Which is one of the famous sort of like scum levels of Coruscant, and where of course that canceled game was going to take place. Was actually the project was named that. And and having to kind of learn, there's a weird sort of like veil. It's not even veiled really. At some point, like there's a criticism of sort of a capitalist system in the Clone Wars, where like you look at these situations where they have this fantastic technology. They have these things that can do like unreal, magical tech things, but people are still starving in the streets. People are still beholden to like shakedown artists, like, trying to run their businesses and stuff. Like and it's part of that is because it's a mashup of space opera and sort of like Westerns. So you need that corruption kind of mob element to sort of give the underworld its flavor. And that's sort of what Jabba the Hutt was in the first place. But you hit a point where like just all the talk in this series, especially about like people being under crushing debt and people being unable to make ends meet, and the frequency of slavery and the amount of resources spent at the top for this like crazy interplanetary war, while like people in like speeder repair shops like are like living as orphans with parents that were killed by like, that's a really cool backstory that they use, where the girls lost their parents because of a mistake the Jedi made. The parents were collateral damage during a chase with Cad Bane that actually happened in the series several seasons ago that Ahsoka remembers.
Yeah,
and
she was
like,
a part of it. So she's like, oh, and I think that was the thing that made her not want to say anything to anybody, because she is feeling responsible for that and understanding that, maybe it kind of in that episode, in a sense, and it does set up that four episode arc, which for that next arc of Order 66, is just reassuring her and reaffirming what she believes in regards to things need to change.
Yeah, and also like it's an interesting parallel with Anakin, because the difference between Anakin and Ahsoka is she's able to let go. She walks away, she accepts her new reality, she finds a new place to be, but then when the chips are down, she does go back to try to save the people that meant something to her. But Anakin could never do that. Anakin can never do that. Anakin can never delegate. Anakin couldn't accept that he couldn't solve all of it. And
yeah, because he wishes he could, and that's what he hopes to do in taking his new role as Darth Vader, and
that's what he's used to doing.
Yeah.
Like every other time that's worked. Like he spent the whole Clone Wars doing that, and that's shown very clearly at the beginning of that Order 66 arc, which is the best written Anakin has ever been, I think. And
yeah, we can get right into that. I mean, it's so well done.
Like this, so clearly these 4 episodes were the Order 66 arc was meant to be a movie. To the point that it starts with the old green Lucasfilm text logo. And because the budget is crazy high, the pacing is incredibly good, the choreography is amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say best sword fight. I mean, lightsaber fight between Ahsoka and Maul ever in the series. And I'm like, this is phenomenal. Wow, like give me more of this.
And the like these episodes are so much better than the rest of the Clone Wars series. It's annoying. Like, and I know they couldn't all be like that because it's a long series and there wasn't the budget and there wasn't the freedom to do it. There wasn't the tech. I mean, you're only finally at the, like, one of the things you see them showing off here is like, yeah, we have the money and the tech to finally put Obi-Wan in his Jedi robe because we couldn't afford cloth physics before now, basically. But like Anakin comes out, Obi-Wan's pinned down on a bridge with Commander Cody and his troops, and Anakin just walks out and is just like, oh, I thought you could use some help. We already finished our thing we were doing. And like walks out and has like a really devious plan that he like tricks the droids into showing their leader, and then he wrecks and the crew busts out and blows the whole thing apart. And is a perfect example of how Anakin thinks that as long as he sort of goes a little bit outside the lines and does what he knows what he needs to do, everything will work out because it all works out for him. And like, moving into episode 3, obviously that stops being true. And like, that's kind of using this movie, let's just call it a movie, using this movie in conjunction with episode 3, like I think it enhances episode 3 tremendously, especially when you see how it works in parallel. I will also go ahead and say that taken as a whole, these 4 episodes, if you consider it like a movie, like, because I think you do. I mean,
I would
match
agree.
these together, and
I would agree. It's a movie. It's a movie. Let's be honest. The way, I mean, even the cuts between where it ends and where it comes back, you could put them together.
Yeah,
and
you could just match it up, and it'd be fun. I mean, I would love to see them do that. I would love to see them put it up on Disney Plus as its own movie, in addition to being there as the season 7 eventually. Yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is the 3rd best Star Wars movie. Like, I would put it only under Last Jedi and Empire. Like, this is an incredible piece of work. Filoni knocked it out of the park, backwards and forth. And actually, I meant to look it up before we did this, but I forgot. I don't remember. I don't know who did the music in these, but dude knocked it out of the park. Like,
he nailed it.
Astoundingly good. It's like a mix of like John Williams and Vangelis from Blade Runner, and it's the most foreboding, like, you listen to it with a good subwoofer, and like episode 3 in particular, like the music is just like got this uncomfortable undercurrent of bass that just lets your spine know that nothing is okay the whole time. You're just waiting for everything to be horrible, and it's so well done. Like I remember I've been watching this sort of piecemeal, and then I got to the end of season 6 and I decided, I'm just gonna wait until all the season 7 episodes are out, and then I'm just gonna watch them all at once. And the first episode of this, episode 9, went up, and my friend Brian, who is also a giant huge Star Wars nerd, like just texted me that day in all caps, Clone Wars, and I was like, what? He's like, have you not seen the episode? He's like, best animated Star Wars thing ever. You need to see it right now. And I'm like, all right, what else am I doing? So I loaded up. I could not believe it. Like the scene in the first episode where Ahsoka jumps out of the lander and just like fights her way down to the ground. That is one of the greatest scenes in Star Wars, period. Full stop. That is amazing stuff.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
choreography is great. Like you said, the fight with Darth Maul, it's not just the choreography, although the choreography is great because they did actually find Ray Park, the guy who played Darth Maul, put him in a mocap suit and had him do it. Like it was, it's not like the weird stop and start fights that the rest of the Clone Wars series has. It's a really good fight choreographed by expert martial artists and fight choreographers.
Well, it's also greatly cut. The music is really well done.
Well, and also
the
more
tension in the
importantly,
scene is amazing, and it adds to everything that's happening.
yeah.
Like everything leads to that moment, and that moment just blows everything out of the water in every way possible. Like I
said that so I watched them individually as they came out, and then when the fourth one came out on the 4th, my movie night crew and I had a digital movie night where we all get on video chat and watch the thing together. And as we were and I said during that, I'm like, this fight is better than any fight in the prequels, like, because not just from choreography, because I think choreography in episode 1's fight with Darth Maul is amazing. Like that fight is still fantastic.
Absolutely.
And the music also great. Duel of the Fates is one of the all-time greats. But nothing in the prequels succeeds as well as that Ahsoka Maul fight in terms of storytelling, character beats, setting, making just Filoni did such a good job there. Like with the fighting in the throne room, like the echoes of the fights between Vader and Luke.
Also the fighting of the outside between Maul's people and the Mandalorian people trying to reclaim their home. Like there is just so much undertones in this.
And then the fight up in the rafters, where they're all like kind of up. What a great setting for that. What a great place that only Jedi could fight and not just immediately fall off, and like kind of the back and forth. And really good. And the fact that if you kind of line up the events, that is taking place pretty much at the same time as the opera scene between Palpatine and Anakin in episode 3.
Yeah, because we had that scene where she sits there and she hears Mace Windu.
Yeah, because that's after that.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like how great Maul. So Sam Witwer really just kills it through this whole thing. His performance as Maul is the best he's ever been.
Maul's probably one of the most underused characters in the entire Star Wars universe because he does such a good job with him, and he continued to do his stuff even in animation, and it's still good.
And in fact, I would say I wish they'd given them a few more episodes in this season, so they could have made, and because this is using old planned episodes that never got made. Filoni at a panel in 2017 talked about the end of this story. He's known for a long time that this is how the series ended. They just didn't have a chance to do it. But one of the other sets of episodes that they didn't get to make was about Maul, and it was turned into a comic series called Son of Dathomir, which was one of the last Dark Horse comics before Marvel got the license from Disney when that changeover happened, and is to my knowledge, the only Dark Horse era Star Wars comic that is still canon, because it is adapted out of the Clone Wars episodes that never got made. And I would have loved to have seen them make that into a 4-episode arc for this season.
I would
because I think it would be a nice sort of flow where you get a story about Rex and Fives that kind of establishes that, because that becomes important. A story about Ahsoka and where she's come since we last saw her, and a story about how Maul became the guy he became to do what he did on Mandalore, to take over Mandalore. I think because those are your 3 primary characters in this final arc, and it would have been nice to highlight each one in their own story arc. So I would have liked to have seen that, but That's my only real criticism there.
Yeah, for sure. When you said that, that's definitely popped in my mind, is those are the 3 key characters, and they constantly, once Maul gets captured and then Order 66 comes through,
which by the way, Maul being captured is one of the great moments in this, because this is a guy who's like, he's super confident, he's super evil, he's violent, he does whatever he needs to do, he has no fear of anything, but he's terrified of Sidious.
Oh yeah,
he doesn't really know what's coming. And matter of fact, when that episode first went up, I'm like, he knows what Order 66 is. Like he's terrified to be around those clones, but he didn't. It turns out later that he didn't quite know what it was.
Yeah, I think he knew it as soon as he tried to manipulate the clone that he captured. I think that's when he found out, and then he's like, oh shit, like I need to get everyone out of here. Like, this is not good. We need to hide. Like, we
And
can't do anything.
he's panicking as they pull him up to the lander, and like it's so good, like because as the audience you know exactly what's coming, and you're stuck in this weird position of saying like, everyone listen to the villain. Like it's like and that's a rare and great story trick you get to pull. Like it's super smart. It's Filoni really thinking on his feet in terms of taking what exists and saying, how can I tell the tensest, like most heartbreaking story possible with what we have to work with in episode 3, and he just picks it up and runs with it, and it's amazing.
And I think this episode really, and especially this and movie type scenario we have, is I think it would not have been as amazing as it was if we didn't have Rex involved, because I think that was the thing that kind of, especially once Order 66 happened and Rex was forced to turn on Ahsoka, I think really changed the elements of how everything is happening. I think even the smallest line where Rex is like, Ahsoka says, "Don't kill him." Like they're still here. They're still your brothers. I'm not going to be the one to do it, and neither should you. And I think that is such a powerful line from everything in the series, not just like this season, but all the episodes of really still saying like, it doesn't matter. This is something out of their control, and we're not going to kill them for making that decision.
Yeah, and you got to also like think about how even the series has touched on a couple times, but like the Jedi really don't value the clones' lives very much. And to see Ahsoka finally come around and she always has to some degree, because the thing that's interesting about her paralleled with Rex is that the two of them are both child soldiers. All the clones and her, they're all, they were all 10 years old when, they matured faster because of the clone rapid aging process thing. But she was like 14 when she got sent to the front lines of an interplanetary war. And he was 10 when he's still like 12 years old. Like that's how old the clones are at this point. At least the ones that started at the beginning of the war. And I think we've always wondered, Rex does show up in Rebels as an older man, and it has been made canon that he is in Return of the Jedi. The older Rebel on Endor with the beard looks a lot like the older Rex in Rebels. And Lucasfilm liked that the fan theory so much, they now say that yes, that's Rex on the Endor raid in Return of the Jedi. So which is really a really cool way to kind of do something retcon that's just sort of a nod to the fandom, which is cool. So I think that and I think that scene with him is really good in the sense that because he survived Order 66, and when you run into him in Rebels, he's kind of a refugee. Like clearly he's with that crew that did not follow Order 66. I think we all just kind of assumed like, oh well, Rex is so close with Ahsoka and Anakin, like he wouldn't have done that. Like he wouldn't have turned on them. And like introducing the chips in the head and sort of like how powerful and how pre-planned that all was, and making it so even he turns makes Order 66 much more tragic. And the second time I watched it, and I think I saw, I need to see it again to be sure, but I'm pretty sure when he talks to Palpatine and then turns to her, I think he's crying.
Yeah, I think he was too.
Yeah, he gets that last, find fives line out, but I think that there's a tear running down his face when he turns to face her again and struggles to not pull his guns out, but he does.
Yeah, and so, it's so tragic just to see the tension of him not wanting to do it, but is being forced to.
And they set up, Jesse is a new character that we haven't seen before, the clone trooper, who is the one captured by Maul and tortured, and who doesn't give it up and refuses to, other than when he uses the Force to rip his mind out, sure. But then Jesse's leading the charge to kill her by the end of the movie, and like it does a good job of sort of portraying it, because that's one of the things I always wondered, and everybody I knew wondered when we saw episode 3, is like, why did they do that? Like, why would these soldiers have less loyalty to these people they fought side by side with on the ground in the field across the galaxy than to this like old man in a robe? Like, why would they're conditioned? Okay, they're conditioned. Yeah, soldiers are conditioned, but like soldiers don't necessarily follow immoral orders like that. Like, you're gonna have a hard time getting a Marine platoon to turn around and shoot their commanding officer, even on the worst of days. But like, you'd at least want to arrest them, right? Not just murder them in the field. And
Right.
so everybody like, what was that about? And so like, you're finally kind of, and that should have been addressed in the movies, let's be honest. But, and probably would have been originally, but we lost the movie to episode 1, which should have been episode 2. And episode 2 should have been about the Clone Wars, and episode 3 should have been the Purge. But now you're getting into my rewritten Clone Wars prequel trilogy. Because here's a fun fact. Because back in the day, Gary Kurtz used to talk a little more openly about the original 9 movie plan, which Lucas later denied as being true, but it was a thing that they talked about. The original plan. So you had Star Wars, which was going to be this trilogy, A New Hope, Empire. Originally, the plan was the prequel trilogy was going to be called Clone Wars, not Star Wars. So it would be Clone Wars. And then 7 through 9 were going to be called Jedi Wars.
Oh, okay.
Because originally Leia wasn't his sister. I mean, originally Vader's not his father. Vader is not his father in the original Star Wars. That idea didn't come up until the second draft of Empire. And then Leia was brought in Leia as his sister was brought in to explain, no, there is another. Because originally that line was a hook for the sequel trilogy. Because they were going to defeat Vader in episode 6, and then Luke was going to go have to find his sister, who was indeed a twin sister, and was being trained by a different group of Jedi on the Outer Rim. But a different group of Jedi in the sense of like Mace Windu, because you notice how Mace Windu is kind of a dick.
Yeah,
like he's a different kind of Jedi from Yoda. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
She was going to have been trained by Jedi like him. And so she was going to be an aggressive fighter. Like she was going to be, we got to go find the Emperor and cut his damn head off. And Luke was going to be more the Zen monk Yoda style. And the one of the central conflicts of the new trilogy was going to be Luke and his sister coming to terms with each other from their very different ideas of what being a Jedi should be. Because she would be a warrior type and he would be, basically you're talking about the difference between like a Jedi watchman and a Jedi consular, I guess would be.
Sure. Yep.
If you're going to go with
peace and war, basically.
Yeah, you're going to go with the KOTOR classes. It would be something like that. Like she would have the 2 sabers and be doing crazy stuff. And he'd be like, maybe we should talk about it, which would have been interesting, but they would have had to make that when Mark Hamill was more like, 30.
Right.
But so I have a whole thing where, again, like I said, you could rewrite the prequels into something it would be great. It would be neat to redo the prequels now, knowing everything we know, knowing how Clone Wars, integrating Ahsoka, like sort of like telling a more complete and functional story. It would be a really interesting exercise to go back and do that. I'm sure they will one day.
Yeah, I mean, even though I don't think it will happen, I do like these pieces of content that they're releasing that is supplementing the bare bones of the bones that were there, that were good, and that it's going to make a good Star Wars. But I just want to get to the last scene before we start kind of wrapping up a little bit. The last scene with Darth Vader walking out into the snow and then holding Ahsoka's lightsaber. And the shot is just really well done, I think, with when he looks to the sky and you can see his part of his burnt face, and specifically his eye through the lens,
which is a direct reference to the first movie, because the eyes on the first movie's Vader suit are red and they are a little see-through. You can see David Prowse's face through it in a couple of shots. So that's what I'm talking about with Filoni's little nods to things like if you look closely, Vader in that shot is an episode 4 suit, and you can tell that because he has the red eyes. He has the tunic is over his armor, which was a mistake that they just sort of rolled with, and it's under the armor in Empire and Jedi, as it should be. And then he has, if you look here's a real close one. If you look at the breath mask, so there's 2 little silver like knobs down at the bottom of the mouth. Yeah. So in the first movie, this one's here and this one's missing. Oh. The one on his right side is missing. And they're both there in Empire and Jedi, but in the first movie, this one is gone. And I learned that because I ordered the Sideshow 12-inch Vader figure, episode 4 version, when they put that out years and years ago, and it arrived, and it didn't have that silver thing there. And I'm like, oh, did that fall off? Did it break off or something? And then I looked through, and I looked at the pictures on the box, and I'm like, oh, it's like that in the pictures. Is that? And I looked up pictures from the movie, and I'm like, he doesn't have one of them on the, like, wow, that's essentially. So Filoni knew that. Filoni made sure that looked the way it's supposed to look. That is almost certainly the last time he held a blue bladed lightsaber before he died before the end. It's also more more fitting in the sense that it's not just his blue bladed lightsaber, but it's one he made.
Yeah,
because
and it was even more impactful because in that
his
moment,
Padawan.
that's his Padawan. They literally had a moment together where he's like, "I'll see you soon." And little do they know, which is such a great moment where the actors did such a good job of not selling anything because they know what happens. So it's really hard to act that scene out to say like, "Oh, you don't know what's going to happen." That all of a sudden they're going to be very different when they see each other again. Extremely different.
And they will in Rebels, which is also a really good when she figures out who he is. It's very sad and very good. There's a couple other good little fan service moments. Speaking of Rebels, the very beginning of the first episode where they do sort of the little recap of like the Clone Wars, what's happening. They show like a bunch of Jedi having a meeting around the table in like hologram form. Mm-hmm. They show a Depa Billaba and a younger boy, her Padawan. The young boy is Kanan. From Rebels, which you would know if you read the Kanan comic spin-off series, which goes into his origin and how he survived Order 66, which is actually a pretty good series. The other fun bit is two fun bit. Another Rebels tie-in when they deliver Maul to the ship for Ahsoka to take him back to Coruscant, and Bo-Katan she's there with the other Mandalorian with her helmet off, like an Asian Asian Mandalorian with black hair. That is Sabine Wren's mother.
Oh, okay.
From Rebels, the Mandalorian with the graffiti artist Mandalorian from Rebels. That's her mom. And then the last little thing I'll point out is when in second episode, Maul has a hologram conversation where he tells his other mob bosses under him to shut everything down and go into hiding, basically, because it's all going to start coming down. So the three he's talking to in the middle is one of the Pikes, which is one of the organized crime people that Ahsoka is dealing with. On the right side is Voss, the bad guy from Solo.
That's
played by Paul Bettany. So that's him. And on the left is Shizor, the leader of the Black Sun, the lizard guy from Shadows of the Empire. And there have been Feline. He's a Feline is the name of that race, but there have been Feline in the new Disney universe. But he's wearing Shizor's clothing, like he's wearing the same robe, the purple robe. It's definitely him. It's his first appearance in Disney canon. Nice. And Filoni just threw that shit in there. I don't even like Shizor very much, but I was like Shizor. I love seeing those weird little things, and so tons of weird little stuff like that in there for you if you're paying close attention. Even, and this is another Filoni, like I said, like Filoni likes to play with his toys. When the Imperial shuttle lands, when the Tidarium style shuttle lands at the beginning of the Vader scene, the landing gear that come down out of it are not the movie model landing gear. They are the same type of landing gear that were on the old Kenner toy in 1983. Which I love, because it's just like, there's a non-zero chance that Dave Filoni just brought his Imperial shuttle in and said to the modelers, use that. And I love that. Stuff like that keeps me excited. And it doesn't impact anything. If you don't get it, it doesn't ruin anything. You're not missing anything. But it's there if you know it and you want to see it, and it's great.
Yeah, I know I watched the documentary series that they do right now on Disney Plus for The Mandalorian about the season and the directors, and a lot of them had said as directors, because Dave Filoni, if I'm correct, did the first episode of The Mandalorian for the season.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And so, but all the directors were actually together throughout each episode. So they constantly said that they reached out to Dave Filoni in regards to asking him questions about Star Wars. And it's just, it's so nice to see someone really love the material in that way. And I know they're kind of wrapping it up a little bit at the end of kind of the future of Star Wars. I know there is Kathleen Kennedy probably will not be in her position, is my guess. And I would say, really get Dave Filoni in, because I think he knows how to write it, and as a creative, at least, for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't replace Kathleen Kennedy with him. Because
I should be a duo, maybe like Jon Favreau and him together, like John handling logisticals.
Favreau would be an interesting choice. I don't know if he'd want that job because it would be so time consuming. I would want Filoni as basically like the chief creative officer or something of Lucasfilm. Like basically he would be the over, because Kathleen Kennedy's position does do that, but she also has to deal with a whole bunch of business shit. which I think is actually her forte. Like she's a logistics producer. I think she's always been a logistics producer more than a creative producer in a lot of ways. And she's really good at that. Like she's done that on some of the greatest films of our lifetimes. So you can't fault her for not being a great producer, because she's one of the great producers of her generation. But I would like to say that Filoni in that situation, where you'd have promoted him so high he couldn't do the job anymore that we want him to do. So I would definitely keep him in as a kind of sort of a close creative oversight role, sort of like Feige. Like Feige doesn't run Marvel Comics; he runs Marvel Studios. You can't have Filoni run Star Wars Inc., which is basically what Lucasfilm is. He has to run the production side, which is so. I think they will put him in the right place. I think Disney knows, especially building off the lessons of Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, that they need someone that loves the material, knows the material, and has an instinct for it, like kind of calling those shots, and not just calling those shots. Because the thing you got to remember as a producer, one of the ways you do your job is to step back and let the people you hire do their jobs. Like you have to know when you're not needed. And that's one of the hardest things some producers have to learn, is like, you don't have to stick your fingerprints over everything.
And I think that's something you can do with everything in general, is like, and I've supervised 20 to 30 employees before I did this. And part of my job was to say, I need to keep my hands off and let them learn and let them do whatever they do best.
Yeah. If everything's going smoothly and the end result is good, if you didn't have to say anything, it just means that you did your job right first.
Exactly.
So that's a hard thing to learn sometimes when everybody's so focused on results. What did you do on this project? What did you do on this project? It's like, what did I do? I hired everyone who did the project. Like that's producing too. You know, that means something too. And I will say, I met Dave Filoni a couple times. He's a really cool dude. I doubt he'd remember me, but one of my favorite time was I went to a press screening of Shin Godzilla, and we were leaving. I was leaving there, and I saw him. I'm like outside. I'm like, he wears this distinctive hat,
cowboy hat.
The cowboy
he always wears
hat.
cowboy hat.
And I was like, oh, that's Dave Filoni. And so I went over and started talking to him with a bunch of other people. Other fans recognized him too, because he's a huge Godzilla fan. And so we're talking, and I just, said I wanted, I was there with Chris Gore, who used to host on G4 and did Film Threat and stuff. So he knew him and introduced me. And like, we talked about this. I'm like, I really liked Clone Wars. This is years ago, of course. So Clone Wars wasn't done yet, but like, I was like, I really like that. And he's like, what did you, what was it? It's like, did you like the Zilla Beast arc? Because like, I'm like, I did. Because he's like, some people hate that thing. I'm like, no, it's a Godzilla movie. I love it.
It's actually, I saw an interview with him and George Lucas just a couple days ago. It's one of his favorite episodes.
Yeah, I don't blame him. It's exactly a Godzilla movie. And so he told me a story. He pulled out his phone. He's like, you want to see some pictures? And like, and I'm like, all right, what do you, and so she shows me these pictures, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, he's like, do you recognize that? And I'm like, that's King Caesar's temple from Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. He's like, very good. Like he's such a huge Godzilla nerd. He went to Okinawa with his wife and took pictures at the actual locations of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And
awesome.
And like has pictures of him holding the shots from the movie up against the actual location. And he also he flew in, like packed up and brought with him, because they were going to like an anniversary, I think the 50th anniversary screening of Godzilla in Tokyo. And he brought his own Mechagodzilla suit. And he had it on. He went to the premiere, and it was such a good suit that the Toho people thought he was there working for them. Like and they brought him into like this special area, the VIP. And it wasn't until it took like 20 minutes until he took his helmet, the thing off, and they're like, "What the hell? It's a white American guy." Like they thought he was there because they hired him, but he's like, "No, this is just my suit." And they're like, "Wow!" And then like when I guess they found out who he was, and like they let him stay and hang out. But like. Cool. I'm like, that was what a great, it's like, of course you want someone like that making this stuff. Like that's the fan we all are, making good on, and Feige's like that too. Feige is a giant comic nerd. He was a PA basically on the first X-Men, and he got promoted because he was saying like that Wolverine's hair was wrong. And it should be, and Hugh Jackman, who to his credit cared so much about getting this stuff right, said, okay, let's go to the makeup room, the hair room, and like show me how it's supposed to be. And like Feige did his hair up into the Wolverine points, and after that, like he basically got promoted to like lore master, and that's how he started in Marvel movies.
Oh, that's awesome.
So every once in a while, like you get one of the right people in the right place. And I think Filoni is that for Star Wars right now, especially moving forward now that you no longer have the structure of the trilogy. And you're kind of like, you have to start telling kind of individual stories, which I think has been the weakest part of the movie so far. You know, Solo didn't really know what it was about. I have heard that this final arc, this Order 66 arc with Ahsoka, was actually pitched as a possibility for the movie that Solo ended up being, like that slot that, you know, that was supposed to be a Star Wars story slot. And I believe, I've been told, I don't know if it's true, but I was told that Filoni pitched this as, why don't we make this that movie? Mm-hmm. I think that would have been a much better decision.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that would have been amazing.
But going forward, I think between this and Mandalorian, Filoni has proven his chops as the person who needs to kind of guide this series forward into this new wilderness of being Star Wars without Skywalkers. Right. You know? And we'll see how it goes. But like, I know Disney wants to do the thing with like Disney Plus. They want new Star Wars content every week on Disney Plus. Of some, you know, right now it's the Mandalorian behind the scenes series. CBS All Access is going to do something similar with Star Trek. Like there's going to be new Star Trek every week on CBS All Access. Some of that looks pretty good. Some of that's going to be pretty good too, I think. But I'm very much behind the idea of letting Filoni kind of run wild in this universe for a while, because I don't think anyone else, even as much as I love Rian Johnson's take in Last Jedi, he's got other things to do. He's got a career to worry about that doesn't have anything to do with Star Wars. I'd rather see him making his own, you know, would I have loved to see Rian Johnson write and direct episode 9? So we would have gotten something that wasn't a pile of complete garbage. Yes. But am I more happy that Rian Johnson got to release a movie of his own and get nominated for an Oscar for it? Yes, that's the move he should have made. Like he made the best move for himself. And I will just have to deal with the fact that no one ever made episode 9, and it's really weird that movie doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think
I will say this, you know, in terms of like all the people who hate the prequels or whatever, episode 9 is worse than all 3 prequels.
I actually am 100% agreement with you on that. So
I've spent years saying episode 2 is the worst Star Wars movie because Attack of the Clones is kind of has a lot of bad. Yeah. But if you strip Attack of the Clones down to its bones, you could make a good movie out of it. Rise of Skywalker is unsalvageable. Like, it's rotten to the core. That's the thing that I've always said. It's like, I don't necessarily like episode 2, but like I can accept the events of episode 2 as having happened in Star Wars. Like, Anakin got assigned to Padme and they fell in love, and Obi-Wan found these clones and they got captured on Geonosis, and there's a conspiracy with Darth Tyrannus and Darth Sidious, and a Clone Wars started because of the conflict on that, and then they got secretly married, and now we're moving forward in the Clone Wars, and that's what happened. I can accept that. I think a lot of moment-to-moment choices are poor, let's say. Sand is very rough, coarse. The bad decisions are coarse, rough, and get everywhere. But I can't do the same thing with Rise of Skywalker. I can't in my mind accept the idea that somehow Palpatine returned. I cannot accept all the garbage that happens nonsensically in that movie. It is so... I tried to rewatch it when it went on Disney Plus, and I got about a third of the way through, and I'm like, you know what? I can't do it. And I made it through Solo again. I did.
Actually, I will say Solo is my worst, but that's
fair. I mean, that's fair. Solo is such an uninspired, dumb idea that, like, but the thing with Solo is, like, Solo is just a movie. It's like Captain America 1. It's like, it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and characters say words to each other, and credits roll at the end. You know, it's like, the only thing I can say about Solo is, like, I don't think I needed to see that. I don't think that needed to exist. Rise of Skywalker is like, what the fuck did you just do? Like, that's the thing. It's like we could do our own separate show on how much I hate Rise of Skywalker, but it's like, the prequels are all bad in a certain way that all bad Star Wars from George Lucas is bad. Like, even the weird, dumb parts of Return of the Jedi are bad and dumb in the same way the prequels are bad and dumb for the most part. Return of the Jedi, if you look at it honestly, tells you the prequels are coming. Like there's similarities and structural parallels there that I like. When you look at that in episode 1, you're like, okay, yeah, we should have seen that coming, frankly. Whereas Rise of Skywalker is a bad J.J. Abrams movie. It's not a bad Star Wars movie. It's a bad J.J. Abrams movie, and that's a very different bad movie. It has more in common with Star Trek Into Darkness than any of the prequels in terms of its flaws and failings. And I can't accept that as Star Wars. And I don't think I ever will. I walked out of all 3 prequels, even with my misgivings about them, thinking, well, eventually they will be smoothed over in my brain and they will all just be Star Wars. And that was true. It's always became true, and even might eventually be true of Solo. But
for sure,
it's never going to be true of Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I think we're total agreements on that.
Thank God for this Clone Wars season and Mandalorian season 1 reminding me all through the Rise of Skywalker debacle that Star Wars can and is still good.
And that is a perfect way to end it, because I think we're 100% in agreement on that too. So I just want to say thanks, Matt. I mean, it's fun to have conversations with you, and especially since you're a huge Star Wars fan. And I'm also not as big as you, but I'm definitely a big Star Wars fan as well.
It's only because you haven't been alive as long.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
I'll get there. There's so much lore. I'm like, holy cow.
But then I'll be like an angry 65-year-old complaining about episode 34 and
who knows?
The same show over and over again.
Well, if Dave Filoni gets in the mix, that might change. So
that's true.
So thank you so much for listening. If you like this content, check us out. We're sifted.net. Go to patreon.com/sifted and just give us a couple dollars. You do get this content early if you are a patron. So if you are not, head over to Patreon so you can get this as soon as we drop it. Also, if you can go to Twitch, you can link that Amazon account to your Twitch account, and you can do that via Twitch Prime and give us a free $2.50. There is more to come with more spoileds. We will definitely be touching games very soon, and I can't wait to do that with everybody. So we will see you next time.